Happy Tuesday. It is 1 o'clock on Tuesday, and as we do every week here on the Facebook channel and then bumped out to the YouTube recorded sessions, I suppose, we are diving into the topic that is top of mind here on Good Food and You all month long. I'm your holistic nutrition practitioner. My name is Lucas Simmons. I see clients one-on-one. I do a lot of classes, some on topic, some more ways to think about introducing food or the concepts of real food to your life. And I love to talk about the power our food choices can have on how we're feeling at the end of the day. So I'm here to help you navigate the super tricky world of how food is supposed to help, which ones hinder. Do you know what's going to be the same answer all the time? Is kind of go with real food. You can't go wrong. And think of how your ancestors might have moved through the food landscape and making those food decisions for themselves. I'm not saying pretend that you have to slave over a hot stove for hours and hours and hours, and that you have to go butcher your own pig out back. Certainly, if you have the ability to raise animals, then yeah, please do. But we live in this brilliant time where we can really rely on our community and connect with people who have the same values we do in terms of environmental values, ecological values, being good humans and good stewards of the land values in caretaking and becoming and being, not becoming, because we always are, being an active participant in the natural world, because we are not separate from it. So my work is in helping empower you to know what are some of those pieces you can start implementing for yourself so that you can feel good. Because when you feel good, the earth will feel good, and then the planet can continue. Do you see my ultimate goal here? P.S. No one's getting out alive. So also, you know, let's just bless and get on with it. Anyway, okay. This month, we've been talking about the thyroid, and today is the last Tuesday live for this topic. We jump into a brand new topic next week as March comes rolling around. I was just doing all of the social media stuff for that. Very exciting. I'm going to cover lots of interesting stuff. But today, our topic is, what is that top contributor to the thyroid slowing down function? I'm going to take guesses. If you know what it is, I want you to jot down in the comments below. What do you think is the top contributor to thyroid issues? I can already imagine what some of those answers are going to be. I mean, even if you're watching this afterwards, go for it. Type it in the comments below. I'd be curious to know what you think would be the top contributor. And it's hard to rank these things. I think there's a lot that can be negatively contributing to thyroid function, but there is one over and above all the others that really unapologetically actually hampers down the thyroid function. Are you surprised to know that it is, I feel like I should have a trumpet, stress? Yeah. Oh, did you find that surprising? Probably not if you've been here for a while. So here's the deal. How is stress a problem? Well, how is stress a problem? Gosh, do you have 17 hours? No, but stress, hear me out for a second. So I'm clarifying for myself what it is I do in terms of supporting people in nutrition. And it has become very clear in the last 6 weeks that, that's what I'm about. I am about reducing the burden of stress. Let me clarify. The burden of stress, it is exactly what it sounds like. It's the burden of stress, and the stress burden itself begets more stress. So it's not by accident that I call it the burden of stress. But when we're looking at the burden of stress, it has to do with how we have evolved through the ages in that stress response. You know, you go back many hundreds of thousands of years ago when humans first started evolving into Homo sapiens, and we developed the stress response to get away from saber-toothed tigers and terrifying animals that were coming to eat us. We had to defend ourselves with our feet, our smarts, our wit, and our community. We had to very quickly go back to safety to protect ourselves from an impending predator. Great stress response, excellent stress response. Those who evolved with that type of stress response in the body live to tell the tale and have babies. Yay, humans. Then fast forward a couple of thousand years and the stressors have shifted. So, you know, if you're talking about anywhere in the Middle Ages, if you're talking anywhere even in fairly recent history, I mean, even within the last 100 years, 150 years. So, and currently, who are we kidding? Currently, there is a scarcity of food in some areas, in some timelines. If you look back, there's, for me, Irish potato famine. There's no food. There was no food. And so people had to scrounge and find things. First Nations have always lived with what the earth gave as gifts and learned to live in reciprocity with what the land gave. When the first African Americans came, and it's a true history of what had happened. The African Americans who came over to the Americas as slaves had to rely a lot on foraging. And they had a very long history for a number of hundreds of years of scarcity of food and resources. The French Canadians on the East Coast, the Acadians actually, the Acadians were completely ostracized and were discriminated against and didn't have access to resources and foods like others who were non-Acadians had. First Nations, same thing. We still see water advisories. How is that happening in 2021? I want to know. Anyway, I know I tend to get political sometimes, because how is food and agriculture and food getting to our mouths not an economical and an agricultural and a political act? All of the above. I digress. So in everyone's history, if you trace back with the people where you came from, I bet you can find a time where your people would have had to rely on foraging, because there was no Safeway down the street where you could pop into the local grocery store, the co-op or whatever, and pick up bananas because you felt like so. So we evolved with this stress response that was tied to a lack of nutrients. I mean, you read stories of how parents had to decide which child would live because they were the ones who would get the food for that day, which essentially meant the other child would not survive or live to tell the tale. It's a terrible, terrible situation. And I don't think humans have ever escaped any of these types of terrors, but it has shaped our stress response. And in those times of scarcity, our stress response shifted. That stress response shifted in actually hampering your thyroid. Here's why. In times of scarcity, you know, we're told that however many calories you're supposed to be able to access a day, that's to keep you alive and well. It's so dependent from one person to the next, and calories in does not equal calories out. Can I really please? That's like a whole other day. Anyway, say it's like 1,500 calories. I don't know. Is that even enough? It depends what you've got going on. And also, let's stop counting calories. But just for the purposes of my expose today, you would have had, we're meant to be surviving on 1,500 calories, 2,000 calories a day. But more, less, depending size, gender, blah, 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 who cares? In and around, let's say 2,000 calories. Well, in those days where there was a scarcity of food, you had to make 500 or 600 calories work for you for the day. Oh, so part of that evolution of stress response in those times was to actually slow down metabolism so that you can make those smaller amount of calories last longer. Because if you slow down the metabolism, then you don't need as many calories coming in. What a brilliant, super evolutionary kind of thing that the body did to keep your people alive. First of all, marvel at the ingenuity of Mother Nature helping us figure things out and evolve so that we can get through whatever is happening in our period of time. Okay, cool, hey? Yeah, totally. So the people who evolved with this ability to slow down their metabolism had a better chance of surviving times of scarcity. Good work, humans. Yeah. Okay, so in that slowing down, in that stress response, now part of what we've evolved with, and that has helped those people before us survive, we now have a stress response in the body, whatever type there is, and I'll get into 3 types in a second. That stress response, part of that mechanism, the biochemistry of it, is to shut and slow down your thyroid. Oh, so that we can slow down that metabolism so you can go further. So I've got somebody texting me and I don't know how to turn off the sounds on my phone, on my computer. Okay, so so as these things started, as we started to evolve, that sort of became part of the biochemistry of the stress response in the body. Well, here we are, 2021. How much stress is out there? Mountains. A lot of mountains. And we no longer find ourselves having to run from saber-toothed tigers like thousands of years ago. We no longer have to make 500 calories stretched out over the course of the day work for us. Oh, okay, so now what? Well, okay, pause on that thought for a second. Now think about this. When I'm talking about the burden of stress, the stress response is the stress response, whether it's one of 3 types of stress. So I've kind of alluded to this a little bit in some videos past, so you can go visit fairly recent ones to get a little bit of a better explanation of this. But there is external stress, internal stress, and emotional stress. So I think of it in 3 layers. So the external stress is stuff that is not necessarily controllable by you. So the stress of the environment, to me, is an added stressor for me. The stress of we're in the middle of a pandemic. Heck yeah. I don't know anybody who's not stressed out by that, except maybe the people who are making millions of dollars. But that's a whole other talk for another day. Anyway, external stress can also be things like, can we make a mortgage payment this month? Is there going to be a job tomorrow for me? Is there going to be a way that we can pay our cell phone bills? And why did they all of a sudden jack up and we are paying an extra $25 a month now? Where's that supposed to come out of the budget? Like those types of stressors, or external stressors as well, of looking after an elder in your circles that you're really worried about them and you're spending a lot of time, a lot of resources, and a lot of time putting in the supports for that person. I would dare say that is an external stress. Yeah, absolutely. Then there's the internal stress, and the internal stress is where I can help. So internal stress is when the body can't digest, for example. That is an internal stressor that adds to your burden of stress. When your liver is having a hard time and you have what's called a sluggish liver, or you're having a hard time conjugating hormones, you're having a hard time balancing sugars, you have a lot of inflammation in the body that your body's trying really hard to clean out, you're not sleeping well at night, all of these pieces, they all add up to that internal stress. Chronic disease, heck yeah, totally adds to your burden of stress. Autoimmune conditions adds to the burden of stress, that internal piece. Chronic disease, chronic conditions, autoimmune conditions, low-grade inflammation, digestion that's not up to snuff. All of that adds up in that internal stress burden. Okay, then there's the third burden of stress, and that is the emotional burden of stress. So that's anything tied to emotions. So if you have worries, anxieties, or you really like work is really stressful, there's a lot of demands, the pace is really quick, everything has to happen, and there's a timeline, and where's that, and I needed that, and oh, I have to have that, and like all of that stress. There's also the emotional stress if there's any struggles in relationships in your life. Could be with workmates, could be with colleagues, could be with a boss, could be with the people who are on your team. Of course, can be with family member, sweetheart, relationship troubles, anywhere you got a relationship with people. That's part of the emotional stress burden. And so is the fear. It's terrifying time to be alive. Is it really? Oh, well, in some cases, sure. But also there's a whole lot of other stuff out there of abundance. I'm just going to say it. So all of these, the external burden of stress, the internal burden of stress, and the emotional burden of stress, they all add up to be your total burden of stress. And anytime either external, internal, or emotional stress shows up, now you're adding to that stress burden. And that overall stress burden trips the stress response in the body. When you trip that stress response in the body, now you start to slow down the thyroid in order to slow down the metabolism because of those people before you who brilliantly developed this mechanism to get through a really hard time where there wasn't enough food. Pause. It's 2021. This is part of what is so stressful right now is I think we have more stress in one day than those who didn't have food. Yes, they had a lot of stressors. I'm not belittling the fact that when there's a scarcity of fuel and food and you have to rely on foraging and on resources being there, that you're crossing your fingers that it rained enough, that you have enough growth of whatever you planted or whatever you're foraging. Yes, that is a true stress. But the added stress of internal stress, because of how the world works, because of where we're at, because of the diseases and chronic inflammation that we are all carrying, and we all have a burden of stress, is compounding all of that even higher. So we find ourselves in 2021 where there is an abundance. Yeah, sure, there's an abundance of stress, but I'm going to invite you to flip around the emotional stress piece and go, well, yeah, I have a lot of worries. I'm not going to belittle that. I am putting in some supports in place to help with the emotional piece. I'm going to connect with a trusted therapist. I can help with that if you need some help. I'm going to start journaling. But over and above that, I am actually going to actively seek out the abundance. Here's a secret. You live in 2021 where there is an abundance of food. There is an abundance of resources. If you want a banana, you drive 10 minutes to the grocery store, you go pick up the banana. It's not hard. And it can cost you 29 cents, which is fairly affordable for most. And those who are in such a super high stress bracket, well, for God's sake, we need to hold them up because we're all here together and we're supposed to be working as a team, not as individual little pods separate from each other. Can we please be more like moss, as Robin Wall Kimmerer says? Oh, I'm on my soapbox today. So the burden of stress is that biggest contributor to our thyroid troubles, the external, the internal, and the emotional stress. I can help with the internal stress, and I can help connect you if you need help with either the emotional or the external stress. I have some resources in place. So if you are struggling with stress, or if you're struggling with thyroid and you're thinking, like I need to actually address this now. It's a really good time to address it because, friend, we're living in a time of abundance and the time is right. And I will tell you that the people who come before you are on your team and they are rooting for you. And they survived all of those hard times so that you could be here. And your work is in surviving these times so that when there is another shift to how we have to utilize that stress response, your ancestors far, far, far ahead of you are going to look back and go, oh, thanks, buddy. I see how that was a gift so that I could be here today. Thanks. So figure out a way today to say thank you to the ancestors who came before you. Think of a way to honor them and think of a way to bring it forward so you can be a good ancestor to those coming after you. And doing that work is one of the pieces that can really help to reduce our internal burden of stress and the emotional burden of stress. And when you do that, you're better able to meet that external stress of burden with a bit more resilience. And when we do that work, our thyroid starts to work better. So yeah, your thyroid, while she's asking for help, is requesting you to evolve. Pontifications from Luca on a Tuesday afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. I went over my 15 minutes. I am grateful you're here. Hit any comments down below. Hit me up with a private message if you need some help to navigate any of this. It's my specialty. You don't have to do it alone. And like Robin Wall Kimmerer says, let's all be more like moss. Let's all work as a unit, as a community, helping each other out and calling out when we need that help. I wish you a fun week and we'll see you next time. Salut, à bientôt!